I work at OSF St. Anthony Matheson. I'm actually the administrator for Rockford Cardiovascular. As you can tell by our conversation, I know both of these ladies through teaching over at St. Anthony College of Nursing. So I appreciate you having me this afternoon. I did my dissertation work on horizontal violence, actually. And the people in my cohort would kind of like laugh because I looked at violence in adolescence. I looked at violence in the workplace, and after a little while, they're kind of like wondering about my personal life, why I'm so interested. I did some work with Mel, in interpersonal violence. So it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that people would be mean to other people. And I actually teach for Walden University online. Actually, it was Capella. I teach for Walden and Capella. And in Capella, it was one of my nurse educator students in the master's program turned me on to a new concept because she was looking at incivility in nursing. And I've always looked at all those ugly words, horizontal violence, bullying, and all those sort of things, but I never knew about this term, incivility. So it piqued my interest. So when I started looking in the literature, believe it or not, all the work in nursing on incivility has been done in nursing education. Now, I was just really kind of shocked. It was just shocking to me because you just don't think of teachers as being mean to their students, but they are, and they're mean to each other too. So I've become very interested in this, and I actually hope to launch a research project before too long, looking either at the cath lab or maybe the OR, because when I did my work on horizontal violence in my doctoral program, most of the studies on horizontal violence, what population they study? The OR. That's where it first started, yeah. And it was interesting because we actually find one of the studies, actually, it's like horizontal violence is an expectation of working in an operating room. Is that weird? And so they didn't see it as not normal because it was kind of like that was just one study. But I looked at it, I thought about that, but it's because it's that intense culture that you work in that people don't see it as abnormal. So you're like, wow, we get ingrained into this, and culturally it gets handed down, and so that's a whole other story. So anyway, I've been interested in the concept of incivility, and I got to figure out how it runs now. Okay, so hit the enter button. This is the disclosure, so that you know that I'm not getting paid for this. And I have I'm not affiliated with anybody. And actually, you know what, if you have other groups that want to hear this content, again, this is going back to my other work on I've studied oppressed group behaviors in nurses. And actually what we know is the way to deal with oppression in nursing is the way to deal with it is to expose it. And so I feel really strongly that we need to expose horizontal violence and incivility in nursing, because what happens is that it gets handed down from generation to generation to generation. So you don't even know that it's not normal. So again, an example of the OR. People in the OR don't know that this is normal. They expect to work in a place where people throw scalpels at them and scream at them and all those kind of things and things that's okay. Actually, I have a nurse that I love her comment. She had a physician screaming at her recently, and I support the nurses. I'm a nurse. I support them. You don't have to take that. You don't have to take that from anybody. And she actually said to the physician, I won't let my husband talk to me like that. I'm certainly not going to let you. I thought, you go, girl. What a great response. Really? Isn't that a great response? Why would I allow somebody like that to do that? So you can steal that line, but she knows she's supported. She knows that I don't tolerate it. So that's a whole other problem. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're going with this. And so I personally just feel very committed that I think this is a topic that we really need to expose and talk about more in nursing. And my thing to move. There we go. So this afternoon, I'm going to kind of talk at you quite a little bit. I like to, if you have a comment or question, because we have till 4:30, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to kind of whip through things, but I don't mind interaction, comments, questions, and I have a couple of things I'll ask you to say, give me your thoughts on this. But we're going to look at the spiral of civility to incivility. It's a spiral. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to talk about what the impact is on the relationships with other people. And that's actually part of that spiral. And then talk a little bit about some of the things that we personally do in the workplace to deal with this phenomenon. phenomena. So, when you think of violence in the workplace, what terms come to mind? So, we hear horizontal violence. What are some of the other terms you hear in the literature?
Like bullying.
Bullying is one. Belittling. Lateral violence. Those are some of the bigger terms that we see studied a lot. It troubles me a little bit because we keep using all of these terms, and so these are some of the terms. It's called lateral violence, horizontal violence, bullying, harassment, and assault. Assault actually is when I'm afraid of you. If you intimidate me, that's classified as assault. You put your hand on me, now we've got battery. And I've used that term in the workplace when I see people get kind of like out of line. It's like, dude, that's assault. And if you touch that person, you do whatever, actually we know that more and more people are filing lawsuits, and physicians are being held more accountable for these behaviors more so than they were ever before. So there's a lot of different terms out there, but you don't hear incivility. Have you heard incivility before today? You don't. And see, you don't, and that's why I thought, well, isn't that a curious term? And actually the person who's done a lot of work in this, in nursing education, her last name is Clark. I don't remember what her first name is. And she did this as her doctoral work. So she just started publishing on it, I think, 2011, 2012. So it really is a pretty new phenomenon. And typical for nursing, we haven't heard about it, because that's what we do, things kind of get squashed. We've heard of all of these. Well, I think, and the literature supports this, that incivility is different than civility, or than horizontal violence. It's different, and I'll explain that in just a minute. By the way, did you know that, I always have to remember this, that they're in the workplace today, across the nation, we average 700 homicides in the workplace every year. Think about that. 700 people are killed on average. The low was like 494, and the high was like 1,000. Isn't that kind of shocking? Now that's all industries. This is even more shocking. Let's see, in 2009, there were 572,000 non-fatal violent crimes in the workplace. In 2009, that's 1,567 people assaulted every day if you just take 365 into that number. It's huge. It's really much bigger than we think that it is. It's huge. All right, so the term incivility, I think it's different than workplace violence. And I think that it explains, like Lindsay and I get along great. Everything's good, we have a good working relationship, and then one day, we're setting up for a procedure, and Lindsay doesn't come prepared. She didn't bring, what's something she should bring for a procedure?
She didn't bring her suture in the room.
Okay, she didn't bring the sutures in the room. And it's like, all right, Lindsay's new, okay, Lindsay's down on, okay, I'll let it go one day. And then the next day, she's not prepared again. And now we're under pressure because somebody's really mad at us, And then I'm just like, no problem, Lindsay, I'll go get this, I'll go get him, and I go get him. And the third day, I snap and I let her have it, okay? That's incivility. So normally, I'm an easygoing guy, I like to make jokes, I like to have a lot of fun, but after a while, it really hooks me, and I let her have it. Now, that's incivility. If I just don't like Lindsay, I might actually hide the sutures or say, I've got the sutures, Lindsay. And then when Lindsay's in getting ready to do the procedure and the doc says, where's the suture? And she's going, so I did it on purpose. So bullying, lateral violence, horizontal violence, has an intentional nature behind it. To me, and the literature supports it, so I don't want you to think it's just all my opinion. But incivility then, we get along fine, and there's just something in the environment that one day I'm rude to you, okay? And that's the difference. So did I mean to snap at her? Probably not, but I've got this physician breathing down my neck, they're doing this in the procedure, and this is going on, and I have to have this right now, and for the 90th time, she's forgotten those sutures. And so I just let her have it, okay? And so I meet her, and does that make sense? So that's kind of, to me, what the difference is between the two. So we don't study that, but what you'll see as we talk is it has a long-lasting effect, and it can, branch into bullying. All right, so civility is, remember these little chipmunks? You first, no, you first. Those little chipmunks. That's what civility is. Civility is being courteous, polite, and I like the term respect, because you'll find the tipping point is when we feel like somebody's lost respect for us. So it's treating each other respectfully in the workplace, like we want to be treated. And we have these social norms, where we expect everybody to treat each other in a certain fashion. And so, we don't even get any thought about it. Incivility, on the other hand, is much easier to see. When somebody is rude to you, they cut you off. One of my favorites is, or they just do things that are so unthoughtful. One of my favorites is the guy who takes the last cup of coffee and leaves that much in the pot so they don't have to make the other cup of coffee, right? That's incivility. That's just plain old, that was just plain old rude, that sort of thing. But when people do that, they'll leave the room a mess. They don't stack clean linen, so it's there for the next guy. They, you can think of some, right? The mean things, they're not mean, they're unthoughtful things that people just, courteous, you don't think about when the next guy's gonna follow you, what can you do to make it nicer? Or it can be somebody, you got this one? Far East, what do you want? You get one of those? Hey, Linda, huh? The rudeness on the telephone. Actually, when you think about it, nobody, we don't really see that person, so we can be kind of ruder on that. So that's an example of incivility. Got some of your own? So you can think of? Yeah. So, so it's easy to see that. People don't have much of a regard for other people, so it's a lot easier to see. Anybody have one to share?
The linen bags.
Which one?
I said the linen bags in the locker room. I mean, if I was a housekeeper, I would just want to try and It's just, I went today, it was as tall as I was.
And nobody saw that?
Right, and I always say, oh my gosh, if our kids did that at home, we would just go off on them.
Yeah.
Not our job.
Yeah, not my job, somebody else's job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's countless, things like that. I have a friend that was kind of funny. She was actually lived in the South, and she was from the North, and she hadn't gotten her Southern accent yet. So she ordered a burger at some kind of at a fast food restaurant, and when she got it, it was ice cold. So she went up to the counter and said, "I'm sorry, this is ice cold. Could I ever read, a different one?" And the person was either having a bad day or didn't like people from the North or whatever. And she goes, "You bought it, you eat it." And she's just like, talk about rudeness, this, So that was a good one. So why is it like this? Well, we kind of live in a whatever society, don't we? It's just like whatever, we sort of live in that society where we see people more as a means to an end than we ever have before. So think about going into McDonald's. When I go into McDonald's, what do I want? What do I expect? Service, quick, right? Like this. I don't think about the fact that there's a person on the other side of that counter, might have a bad day, whatever. I want my burger, I want it done this way, And so we live in this kind of push-button society, if you will. So we cut people off in traffic, we're rude to other people, whatever. My son actually lives in Chicago right now, and he's like, he can't wait to graduate and get out of Chicago because he feels like they're just the rudest group of people, and everybody is out for themselves. I'm just kind of, well, dude, don't want to shock you until you get your first job, but it kind of unfolds that way as well. So we're kind of getting in this kind of society, right? And so I think it's beginning to spill over into the workplace just a little bit. So I personally, like when I'm in the Walmart checkout line and I see the person going, I always ask them about their day. I always chat with them for a couple of minutes, do something, because because I think how they must feel that people just go through and see them as a means to an end to get me through. People don't have patience kind of to wait. Comments, questions? Agree, disagree? Kind of where we're going? People even text all the time, and I would say, what? I asked one of my boys one time, it's like, come on, dude, pick up the phone and call me. And I said, why won't you call me? He goes, because then I'd have to talk to you. But yeah, you see that? I mean, you see a lot of people that are texting like that. So, okay, so the difference between the two is it's really kind of a continuum, if you will. Incivility is on this end of the spectrum and horizontal violence is on the other end. I'm going to stay on this end of the spectrum, but we have to kind of compare that. And when you think about it, incivility tends to be verbal rather than physical. I say something mean to you, right? I don't go out and push you or do something deliberately to ruin your day. It's, it's something I say to you. It tends to be passive, So again, when's it to go. She left. So Lindsay and I, I'll go to the other Lindsay. So, Lindsay and I, when she does that, a lot of times I don't want to confront her and say, Lindsay, would you just get a checklist together so you bring the sutures in every time? I'm afraid of her, and most people don't like conflict. I also teach a conflict management class. So instead of just saying, hey, Lindsay, would you? Or, hey, Lindsay, when you said that hurts my feelings. Instead of doing that, what I do is I throw a snide remark at her. You'd forget your head if it wasn't so not. I'll go get them. Or, if I don't say my snide remark to her, who do I say it to? Everybody else, right? And that's usually what we do more so. So that's why it tends to be verbal, it tends to be passive, it tends to be indirect, because I'm not going to confront her. And then lastly, it's more subtle. So I might just put in a little dig, and she might just sit there and go, did she just say something? I mean, and that might be what I do. By the way, when somebody does that to you, don't overlook that. Like I would go to somebody and say, Lindsay, it sounded like you were just making fun of me, were you? No, I didn't mean to do. That's what she goes, oh, I didn't mean that, right? That's what she's going to do, right? But the one of the best ways to counteract somebody doing something like that is to confront them in a nice way. I'm not sure I understood what you were saying. Could you repeat that? Or it sounds like, I like. It sounds like you're making fun of me. Were you? So I'm not going to let that go. But see, so incivility tends to be on that other side. And see, I think that's pretty apparent in many places where we're at. Just shout out if you have something you want to say. I'm kind of watching the time. So, the difference lies in intent. He says, in workplace violence, WPD, there's intent to harm. I meant to make your day hell. I meant to do whatever. I meant to hurt you. I meant to tell somebody else what you did. Amanda. I meant to tell Amanda something about you because I knew it would get back. Right? And so it's intent. I intend to harm. But on incivility, it's not quite so clear cut. Because usually it wasn't my intent to hurt her. It was the frustration of the moment that made me say that. Right? And so it's kind of like this little squirrel. Because who, me? I didn't mean to take the peanuts. Right? It's kind of that sort of thing. Who, me? No, wouldn't have been me. Sorry. Isn't he cute? I didn't mean to take the peanuts. How many times has that happened, though? You catch somebody in a lie. Who, me? No. It's cute. All right, so now we come into the realm of it's about perceptions. Incivility is all about perceptions. So a person can behave uncivilly without intent. They're just ignorant. They didn't even think about how this might hurt the other person, or they just it might be oversight. They just didn't realize what they were doing. Or I may have intended to harm her, but I wasn't aware that I meant to harm her. So again, when she didn't bring in the sutures for the 80th time, I lost patience with her. And it wasn't that I wanted to hurt her feelings, it was that I wanted her to stop that behavior, right? So that's kind of the difference between the two. So it really becomes about perceptions at that point in time. So when you see somebody do that, you have to ask yourself one of these three questions. Are they is Lindsay, well, now I'm switching. Lindsay would think about me, Is Linda just thoughtless, self-absorbed, she just always just thinks about herself? Did I have unconscious intent based on past incidents? Well, geez, maybe she's right. Maybe I really am not very prepared when I'm setting up for these procedures and I need to, make sure I do a little bit better job. Or did she lack control at the moment of the truth? Did she just snap? We're all under pressure. We're trying, what'd you say, how many cases you got this afternoon? 4, 7? 7,
Yeah.
That's going to put people on edge. And I'll come back to that thought in just a moment. But you can look at that and try and ask what's going on with this other person. And so my little rabbit down there says, it's all about me, just deal with it. So you're kind of trying to look at what was going on with the other person. So with incivility, the intent is not transparent, and it can be subject to a lot of interpretations. Really, you look at Linda and you say, gosh, she's really just a nice, easygoing guy. Something must be going on, and you can let it go. You go, well, that, Linda was just having a bad day. Or, or maybe there is something bigger issue here that I need to look at. We don't know because, remember, it's passive, and it tends to be verbal, and it tends to be, hidden. So she's not necessarily going to know what's going on with me. As compared to workplace violence, the instigator can deny or bury the intent. So when Lindsay confronts me, I might say something to her like, well, it wasn't meant personal. It wasn't meant to be an attack on you. It wasn't anything personal, you know, or she didn't understand. You misinterpreted, you know. I didn't mean to be rude. I was just in a hurry with blood pressure. Or a lot of times people say, oh, she's just super sensitive. Just don't take it personal. It's nothing. That's the way we do it in the OR. You know, we talk like that to each other. That's just the way it is. So not to worry about it. Now this is kind of a key slide. This is a cath lab actually. But the need for civility becomes even greater. I forget that it's down here. When the interactions between people increase in complex or frequency. So I think that's why we see these behaviors in cath labs, ORs, emergency rooms. Now, do we see them on med surg floors? Of course we do. But they seem more prevalent or bigger in these areas, do you think? Everybody's probably worked on a med surg floor. Do you think so? Because you literally, it's life or death when in your situations, you know, when you're caring for people that are totally vulnerable, it's life or death. And if things are going down the tubes quickly, you know, you get, and then it gets tense, and then you've got physicians, and you've got time schedules, and you've got supplies, and you've got da 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 da. So I think that that's why we might see this more in these type of environments. So what happens? We get a spiral going. So what happens is this spiral starts because people don't really understand the situation, or they are not willing or able to alter the way that they're acting. And you ever have times like when when you have like a really stressful week, there's a lot of patients, there's a lot of things going on, you know, people die in threes, you know, so you've had 2 go, you're waiting for the 3rd guy to go, you know, and that, you know, that pressure that's on you. Well, you oftentimes get wrapped up in that situation and you can't step outside of it to see that what's going on is a product of the environment and your feelings, your tense feelings, you know, because we can only just take so much. When you go to work on any given day, there's 3 things that are at play in the level of happiness of a worker. And they are the policies and procedures of the organization, I can remember 2 of them. There's 3 things at any given day. One is the policies and procedures. The second is, I can't remember the second one. The third one is what's going on in your life, your own personal life. I can't remember what the second one is. Your level of happiness is determined by policies and procedures, what's going on in the day. Anyway, I don't remember what the third, there's kind of 3 broad things. I say this all the time, I can't pull the third one into my brain. So it's some of it is your own personality type. So, and I have control over only one of the 3 things. Can't remember what the other one is. Oh yeah, that's what it is. 1 is your basic personality. 2 is what's going on in your life. 3 is the policies and procedures, what we do to you. So when you come to work on any given day, we really only have control over 1 of those 3. So I can be the happiest, go-lucky little guy you ever saw, and the work can be okay, but then if my dog dies, my husband leaves me, my house burns down, my kid's car breaks down, I can snap. There's just so much that I can take. So really, when you think about it, really what's going on in the workplace is really small when you consider personalities, you know, so I can be really upbeat, optimistic, but I can only take so much. On the other hand, I can only take so much, and it's going to start wearing me down. So what happens is, but I can't see that. And because sometimes we're not able to step outside of it and see all these things that are going on. So we start on this spiral. And the spiral starts when one negative thing that I do sparks the negative thing in the other person that they do, okay? So we get this spiral of incivility. And so step 1, what's that?
I said it's like our lounge at lunchtime.
Yeah, yeah, it just starts going, doesn't it? It does, it just starts going. And so what happens with the spiral is somebody perceives that a workplace norm is violated, and usually that workplace norm is respect. So when everybody's standing in the room and I snap on her like, can't you ever come prepared? What's wrong with you? Isn't your head screwed on? She feels violated, embarrassed, disrespected, right? So that's usually the feeling that we have. And so then I feel that, Lindsay feels that was really unfair. I'm not going to take that, you know, I'm not going to get that. So now the stage is set. when she feels disrespected, she's not gonna take it. So, things can go one of two ways now, okay? Once she finally feels that infraction, things can go one of two ways. One, she can ignore the behavior, okay? So, she may choose to do any of those first three. She'll just go, oh, it was no big deal. We were all really busy. Linda was having a bad day. I'm just gonna let it go. She could choose to do that. Or I could realize that, oh my gosh, I really was inappropriate there. That really wasn't fair to me. And I could go to her and say, I'm really sorry, Lindsay. I'm sorry that happened, okay? If either one of these things happens, this spiral ends there. We kiss, hug, make up, sing kumbaya, there we go, right? And so it's fixed, so it can end. But when she takes this over and over and over again, because remember, I'm afraid to confront her, so I do this all passive stuff and I put out my little snide remarks all the time. Well, what happens is she can only take that just so long. And she's going to reach the tipping point. So that's the magic moment when the behavior crosses the threshold and it spreads like a wildfire. So she just says, that's it. Now really, she says, that's it. I'm not going to take this anymore. So it's literally the straw that breaks the camel's back. That's it. And how many of us feel like this sometimes? I wish it was just one little straw that people have, but really, like in this, I assume that's a donkey. I don't know what it is. Looking at us. But you know what? Look how heavy he is. And I think when I found this picture, I was like, that says it, because a lot of times she takes it for a long time and that stack is pretty high before she finally says, I'm not going to take this anymore. So, why does she reach the tipping point? Because it's a threat to her identity. She loses face. So my identity is created by what I think about myself. Any of these characters out there, I think I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm strong, I'm really a good OR nurse or PACU nurse. I'm really a good nurse. I'm female, whatever the race is, we have this image of ourselves. So what happens is that by doing that in front of everybody else, or it could be just interpersonal between us, she loses face because she feels like she's been disrespected. So what happens when you lose face? When somebody embarrasses you in front of other people, threatens your identity, what's your personal response? Or how do you think people would respond? Wouldn't be us. We wouldn't feel like this. What would we feel like if somebody did that? I might get defensive, angry, I want to retaliate back. Yeah, usually anger, some form, even feeling defensive is a type of anger. So it's usually anger. And usually what happens then is that anger fuels the desire for revenge in some fashion or another. And revenge is intended to have harmful consequences. And the reason I do that, the reason she retaliates back, is she wants to restore her face. Now, if revenge worked, then the incivility would go away. But it doesn't work, right? That's the problem. It doesn't work. Gaining revenge, she might feel better for a couple minutes, but it actually adds to this spiral. So again, the tipping point is still not inevitable at this point. I can now apologize for the behavior, or she can do any one of these things. She can, she can go, well, really, I just absolutely had it, but I'm not going to do it because I see that she's having a bad day. The workload's tight. It's same things that could have happened before it got to this point, but we're given another chance before we actually start, with that retaliation. So she could do nothing. She could choose to just ignore it, or let's say choose an action to de-escalate the situation. So, but usually, I didn't want to skip that. Usually what happens, which is a little bit different at this point, is she starts venting to other people. That's where now we get the spiral goes out on everybody else. And so now you got the day shift mad at the night shift, or the PM, PM and days think the night people don't do anything anyway, and so you can actually galvanize, right, they do. They can actually galvanize each other. So actually that's why I wanted to point that out, because I'm going to vent. It's safer to talk to Amanda and everybody else. Amanda, right? It's safer to talk to Amanda, and then now, again, it's safer there, but it's starting to spread like wildfire, right? You've seen this happen. And entire shifts, entire teams, entire departments get against each other if this spiral continues. So we hit the breaking point, and this is where it now begins to spiral. And there's an increase have a hard time. I want to be close to you. I just can't stand with this. So now it's an interesting phenomenon that happens next, is that there's an exchange of increasingly counterproductive behaviors, and now we intend to harm the other guy. Okay, so now that's where we're going with that. So the interesting thing that happens is that, okay, so I smart back to her, I say something mean to her. Now, what happens is she becomes the victim. So now we're both actually sharing the same role, if that makes any sense to you, because now she feels like a victim, I feel like a victim, and now who's Lindsay gonna start talking to? I'm already talking to her. No, wait, you're already talking. I gotta keep the roll straight. Lindsay's already talking to everybody else. Who am I talking to? Everybody that she's not talking to, right? Right? And because, does that make sense? So now we're both victims. At first, she was the only victim, but when she retaliates against me, and I don't understand what's wrong, I have no idea why she'd be rude to me. Why would she do that? Now I'm the victim, and now I'm gonna go through that same cycle that she went through. It's fine. It starts. Okay? You see that happen? Interesting that it happens. I watched it. We have like you might have in the cath lab, you might have the rad techs against the nurses, or the CNAs against the nurses, or it tends to kind of group like that. So it has a ripple effect. And this is if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, because eventually what happens is this begins to spread to everybody else. You have lowered morale. You have people like, I'm not working there anymore because that's a nasty group of people, and I've got better things to do with my time than work with that group of people. You get loss of productivity. I'll be darned if I'm gonna help her. Struggle girl. Yeah, I paid my dues, you pay your dues, right? And the poor working relationships. So that's the impact of all this. So what happened just between us, eventually can spread to everybody else if it's not checked somewhere in between. So, what do we do? What do we do about this? You pay attention to your relationships. Now, the first thing I do when I think that I offended somebody is I'll go back and I'll say, Lindsay, I said something to you when I was upset the other day. We looked up my apology or whatever. Now you pay attention to relationships. And I think it's the leader's job to pay attention to relationships also. A lot of times, and I'm going to speak blanket because I don't want anybody to say, you said, but a lot of times nobody likes conflict. And a lot of times managers and lead people and team leaders and charge nurses, they don't like conflict either. And you have to balance if I'm going to get involved in a conflict or not, because I'm not mom. I'm not everybody's mom. I have 5 boys, and if they're gonna duke it out, I can stand in, they're all taller than me, I can stand in between them and do this. But I'm not gonna do that because I want them to resolve their own conflicts. I'm not gonna do that until the problem escalates beyond the 2 people, beyond the guys. So if they're gonna punch each other and I'm gonna have to take somebody to the emergency room, now I get involved, because that involves other people. But even with the staff at work, I try to coach people if they have an issue. If somebody has an issue with Lindsay, I try to coach them and role play with them and get them to go talk to the person first, because I'm not the mom. I cannot solve, and it's not my job to solve everybody's problem. But the minute it starts spreading out beyond Linda and Lindsay, now I'm going to get involved as the manager, because I know where it's going and I'm going to stop that. So I watch relationships and sometimes mediate on different things, but that's really the key. So the first thing is follow the golden rule. If I have to treat other people as I want to be treated. And it's kind of an interesting thing with women sometimes, because they'll coach you to act towards other people like you expect them to treat you. So, example of that. If a physician is screaming at me, take my nurse, I gave you that example, sometimes I I will just take, not sometimes, I know a lot of my staff just take it, you know, because he's the doctor and he's in charge. So if he wants to yell at me, okay, you know, and I'm telling them that is not okay, that they shouldn't. But what you should do, as in my nurse's example, she says, I won't let my husband talk to me like that. I'm certainly not going to let you, you know. So she acts towards other people like she expects them to treat her back respectfully. Make sense? Because if I cower and I think, oh, well, you know, he's this all-powerful doctor, or that's the team leader, or, you know, whoever, or I'm afraid of conflict, when you respond like that, people don't think you deserve respect. And they're going to continue to treat you disrespectfully because they just think you're a wimp or whatever that you just don't deserve. But if you stand up, you know, to that, not in a mean way, but, you know, you know, no, I expect you to talk to me in a normal manner, you know. Does that make sense? So, because sometimes we have lower self-esteem, and you don't want to do that. Interestingly, since we're all women, I can tell you this. Let me show you what, if somebody's screaming at you like this, screaming at Amanda. If I'm standing here screaming at Amanda, you know, watch what happens when Amanda stands up. Because I'm not just yelling at you, so stand up, Amanda, because I'm going to let you have it. And then, can you kind of see the difference, what happens? A lot of times women will stay seated, and you're sitting down there, and I'm yelling at you. Men know instinctively to stand up. Men will stand up. Or if you sit behind the counter, they won't stay, you know, they'll get up. I get up, walk around. Okay, you want to talk to me? You know? And you can really change because I'm showing them that, and that's not an aggressive thing. I just calmly stand up, and if somebody's on me, I calmly stand up and go and stand and talk to them. You know, because I'm going to show people that this is how, you know, I want to be treated. I expect to be treated. Should I stop moving around?
No, you're fine.
I can not go to do that. Okay? So we just have to ask ourselves, do I do this? Do I ever do this? Do I speak to somebody rudely? Am I short with somebody else? Am I the guy that leaves the little bit in the coffee pot, you know, for the next guy, or lets the linen stack up? You know, am I the guy that does that? We just have to ask ourselves, you know, do we do that? So that's the first thing, we question our own behavior. The second thing is to recruit and hire people who seem courteous. I love this guy. He goes, ooh, pick me, pick me. It's from Shrek. He goes, ooh, pick me. But, you know, when more and more people are doing behavioral interviewing where they're trying to get a better feel for somebody's personality rather than just a warm body. So you want to ask situational questions, and you want to try to find people that are going to fit in with your culture, what it is that you're trying to build.
Hire for attitude, train for skill.
Yep, good. She said hire for attitude, train for skill.
That's
Yep.
what Dr. Dorsey said.
Yep. And it really is important. It really, really is important. I don't want to hire a nurse who just sees me as another guy to get through the PACU for the day. I don't want to hire that person. You know, for me in the clinic, I don't want somebody who's just rooming patients all day. You know, no, I want somebody who's engaging, exactly what you said. So, how was it? It was hire
For attitude, train for skill.
That's okay. I'm going to steal that now. I like that. The next one is off with their head. Remember this one? You know, address acts of interpersonal rudeness swiftly. And this is, if you treat me rudely, I need to respond quickly and not let that slide go. We were talking about that earlier. But again, as a manager, it's my job to hold people accountable, because I need to I need to hold people accountable. And if somebody is rude to somebody else, I need to step in, or people need to step in as quickly as they can. Oh, then, because this kind of goes on to that, is hold people accountable. Those who instigate uncivil behavior must be held accountable regardless of their position in the hierarchy or special talents. I've seen this over my years in healthcare. That particular job class is hard to recruit for. So or the years of experience. Linda's been an OR nurse for 25 years. Nobody knows how to set up for open heart surgery cases better than her, and she's the guy you want on her team. But guess what? Nobody will work with me. Nobody, everybody said, I don't want to work with that witch. And because remember we said productivity drops, you know, the patient's going to pick up on that. One of the survey questions is, how well did the team work together to take care of you? You know, and it goes for physicians, it goes for managers, you know, it goes for all of us, holding each other accountable that we cannot be that rude or impolite to each other and get away with it. This little cartoon says, you've got a problem with avoiding personal accountability. He goes, yeah, and whose fault is that? So not his. Okay, education. I think that it's important to do classes. That's, as I mentioned earlier, I feel very passionate about this topic, and I think the more people that we tell about this, the more it will get exposed for what it is, because again, every group I've ever talked to about this concept has never heard of the concept of incivility. They've heard of horizontal violence, but circling back, this is about Linda Matheson, who's a nice guy, and just loses it one day and starts this spiral that eventually escalates. So I think it's important for us to share that with other people. I also think that culture starts at the top. Oh, thank you. I also think that culture starts at the top. And so it is my responsibility as the administrator to treat everybody well and kindly every step of the way. Because again, what we know is if I have a front office assistant who's interacting with the patients and she's getting them registered, and I just uncaringly said, I don't care if you're getting married next summer. You should have requested it off 3 years ago. You know, right? Ever had that? And so now Amanda's really upset and angry. So when she goes to take care of, register a patient to come into our clinic, you think she's going to be very happy? She can go, oh, I'm so happy to, it comes out, doesn't it? Somehow when people are upset, it comes out, and patients are able to pick up on that. So I think that it does start at the top, and I think we do have to have education, and we have to expose it, we have to talk about it. I did this same presentation in the spring for the Alliance of Cardiovascular Professionals, and they wouldn't stop talking. It was wonderful, and they had people from different places were talking. Mostly, it seems like it's related to physician behavior, at least for them it was, being treated in a certain way, and then it escalates down to everybody else. That's lateral violence, by the way. If your boss comes and yells at you, and then because I can't yell back at my boss, so I go in and take it out on Amanda, that's lateral violence. Incivility is just, like we're not getting along and I'm rude to you. Or maybe I did just get my vacation denied, so I'm rude to you. There's two different causes of those behaviors, and there's two different solutions. So I think that this is something we can do. Conflict management classes, again, I think that we need to teach people how to handle conflict, because a lot of times, who likes conflict? Who doesn't mind conflict? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, I'd be worried if anybody raised their hand, Because I had one guy once, I was teaching at Rock Valley College in the Business and Professional Institute, and this guy went, I like conflict. And I'm like, where do you work? Because I'll make sure I don't go there. But most of us don't like conflict, and most of the time, how does conflict make you feel? Uncomfortable, yeah. And usually we're more afraid of what the other person's going to say than how it's really going to unfold. So we don't address conflict immediately. We don't like it, it makes us uncomfortable, so we avoid it. And I think if you could take classes to how to handle conflict, you'd feel more comfortable saying, Lindsay, that sounds like you were just making fun of me, were you? And that's not confrontational at all, is it? But it was, or Lindsay, when you got off work last night, I really would have appreciated it. If you would, the room, if the bed would have been made, and the patient would have been alive, and those sort of things, So, but that comes from some level of confidence in being able to handle conflict. I do mediate, and I'm going to share this with you real quick because you can actually do this as well. It takes, I think, I'm old. I'm 58 years old, so I had a lot of time to practice this. But because I think that it takes practice, if you will, on how to mediate between employees. So what's your name? Amanda. All right. So Amanda comes to me and says, do you know what Amanda did? She blah, 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 blah. So as a manager, or even as a friend, I'm going to say, well, Amanda, did you talk to her yet? What's she going to say? No, because remember, it's incivility. She wants to spread about me. Okay, well, would you like to role play it out with me? So we can kind of practice this, and then you can go talk to her yourself. What's she gonna say? No, because she's really hoping that I'll take care of it for her, right? And so then the third option is going to be, well, when you decide you want to talk to her. Oh wait, I missed an option. So, well, actually, the fourth option is when you decide you're going to talk to her, let me know, because usually she's going to not want to do anything about it. But the step before that is, would you like me to sit down with both of you and have this conversation? She may or may not say. If she says no, that's when we move to step D and say, well, when you're ready to do something about it, let me know. Or, you know, Linda, I just wanted to vent. Okay, you vent, you're good? Okay, then we're good with that. So if she says, yes, she wants me to mediate, I am only going to offer that and do that if I think their conflicts start to spill out to other people. That's the only time I'm gonna do that. Otherwise, I rob you of the opportunity to grow if I go talk to Amanda. I rob you of that, and I don't wanna do that. And not only that, if I do the talking for you, Amanda, there's somebody that has an issue with you, and I can't tell you who, but you really need to start bringing the sutures into the room, okay? Now, what's she gonna think?
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I know exactly about it. I know who it was. You do, don't you? She knows who it was. Or she's gonna go, well, who was it?
Right.
It's gonna be, yeah, some combination there. So guess what, Amanda? I can go to her and talk to you, talk to her for you, but when I do that, she's gonna wanna know who. So are you comfortable with that?
No.
Okay, well then when you decide what you wanna do, let me know, okay? And so that's what I do, because I'll tell people that, are you just not, you know, because they figure it out. Nobody is stupid, that's always gonna happen. Now, on the option, and I try to steer people towards this, is, you know what, Amanda? Amanda just agreed, she wants to talk to Amanda. Oh, I just get over there, right? Talk to herself there. Okay, so Amanda's agreed she wants to talk to Amanda. What I do is when I get them both together, I'll go to Amanda and I'll say, Amanda wants to talk to you, Amanda. This is kind of fun. And she wants to talk to you about, you know, being better prepared for the OR. So, because we've had this conversation, would you mind meeting all three of us together and have this conversation? See, so I'm going to tell her a little bit because I respect her, and I'm not going to have her, oh gosh, what's going to happen? She's all nervous. So then when they get together, well, I set the ground rules. And you can do this with your kids, you can do this with family members. It isn't just something that's work related. That's why I'm sharing it with you. But I'll go, okay, Amanda, I want you to tell your side of the story. And Amanda, you can't say anything until she's done. When she's done, I need you to restate what you heard her say, until she's happy that you understand what it is that she says. That's called reflective listening. We get that in school all the time. And then once Amanda is satisfied that Amanda knows exactly where she's coming from, I now allow Amanda 2 to have her say, and I have Amanda 1 to restate that, so that now we've both got everybody out on the table and everybody clearly understands each other's position. Usually when you do that, you can find common ground between the two people. You almost always can. You know what? You're both concerned about making sure that the room is ready when we're really understaffed and under pressure. You're just not agreeing how to get there. And so I find the common ground. Because when I listen to both of them, I can figure out, because a lot of times I don't know what's fact or fiction, right? I don't know who's lying, who's telling the truth. And so that helps me to do that. And then usually they can problem solve from there. And then they don't always go out of the room singing Kumbaya, but you know, usually they'll go out with something they can live with. That's my goal. So I will mediate, but it's only, you know, I make the decision, you know, because I don't want to be somebody's mom. That's not my job. I have 5 boys. I have full-time job with 5 boys, right? So, okay, and then the last thing is to have fun with each other. I won't ask for a show of hands here, but how many of you have heard people who say, I look at her face 5 days a week, I'm not looking at her face on my day off. I'm not going to the company picnic, I'm not going out for drinks after work, I'm not, right? I look at her 5 days a week, that's enough, right? And you know, that's a mistake. And actually what I've done is I have events at work during the day because, and honestly, you know, I have a lot of women, they have young children. They can't just come in for the weekend, they live out, you know, we all have busy lives, so we can't always get together. But if you can, and you can promote that, or there is some event going on that's during your off hours, try to go. Because once I know that Lindsay's a student of mine, I'm having a real hard time yelling at her when we're in the OR, right? And once I learned that, you know, somebody else has children, also has 5 boys, it builds a camaraderie and it's helpful. So don't avoid, I used to call it hot dog day when I worked over at Rockford Health System. Another manager, you know, we'd have hot dog day and we'd be serving up serving up hot dogs, and somebody go, why don't you give me a hot dog instead of a paycheck? Or give me a raise in pay instead, or something like that. And somebody standing by me said, well, because the hot dog wouldn't fit in your paycheck. Have your hot dog. You know? So I always say, don't ignore hot dog day, you know, because it gives us a chance to, there's reasons for that. It gives us a chance to meet other people in different circumstances and different times when we're not always under pressure and we get to know each other. And so this is neat. This is what we did in the middle of the day. And just so they can take their meanies out, there's my manager, and there I am. Boom, you know. And actually, everybody remembers that. And they were, you know, we had some of the docks up there, so people were throwing the balls at the docks and sinking them, and it was really a lot of fun. So we did that during the day, so that's what I do. We do kind of fun stuff because, again, I think the fun stuff helps under the times when we're really under pressure. It's going to make it easier for me to forgive Lindsay when she's grumpy at me, and it didn't really matter. I put research. I think we need to do more investigation into this. So, because I think there's a lot more that we can learn about this, and I think it'll give us a different thing to hang our hat on, you know. So, comments, questions? I saw laughter and nodding heads. It kind of fits.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Kind
You
of
just described everything every day.
Yeah. And you know what? It's not unique. It's not unique to you guys.
So it's probably the incivility that happens the most.
Do you think so?
I think so.
I think it's a precursor to.
A precursor to.
All of the lateral violence.
Yeah, it's a continuum. I think some of it is cultural, but I think it's on a continuum. I think it is because the minute I flip over into I'm doing it on purpose but there's the terms, the cause is different, and that's one thing I want. There's two different bodies of research. You know, I believe horizontal violence comes out of oppressed group behaviors, and we don't have time for my 120-page dissertation, but if I feel oppressed by administration or physicians above me, and I can't take it out on them, I turn and I take it out on other people. The solution to that is much more different than I'm in an intense work environment, things are going on, I'm a nice guy and I snap. They're different. You know, the second one, I always tell people that I don't think there's any bad people. Well, maybe there are a couple, but I mean, for the most part, healthcare workers, we're not in this profession because we're mean people. It's usually there's problems in the system or the processes which bring out the bad in us. So again, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy, pretty easy to get along with, but for the 80th time, I've got somebody breathing down my back and Lindsay forgets to bring in the sutures, I snap. And I wouldn't normally do that if it weren't a better system that maybe we had a robot that brought the sutures up and we didn't have to worry about it. But it really usually is process. It usually is some kind of a system thing that brings out the worst in me, because most of us were not like that. We're just not, you know. Other comments? The next step is, you know, looking at the group and figuring out what can we do differently to, you know, establish our norms and acknowledge that this happens and stop it. I think that's the next step. Okay. Well, if you're coming to Nurses Expo this year in February, I'm going to do the same presentation. So come back. And I will be glad to come back on another time when it, you know, because I think it's, I usually we sit and go, there's other people that need to hear this, so.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Yep.
We had a toy train.
And if you ever get a survey in the mail from me that says I'm conducting a study, please answer it and send it back, because I was thinking I was going to do this and look at cath labs, because nobody studies anything in the cath lab. We, like I said, the OR is what gets studied, and they're both equally intensive areas, you know. So the roads are clear, so when you head out that way, you can feel comfortable. You're not going to be